Just 1, 2, 7, okay. Hallo und willkommen alle miteinander. Wir sind eine Idee spät, aber dafür hören wir früher auf, das ist ganz einfach. Ihr habt euch, wenn ihr euch nicht verlaufen habt, für das Künstlergespräch mit Rex Morales eingefunden. Wow. Yo, wow, wow, wow. Offensichtlich habt ihr euch nicht verlaufen, sehr schön. Ich bin Steffen von Panini.
Auch wow, wow,
wow. Und ich mache mich erstmal frei, weil hier ist es brutal warm. Und ich werde euch durch dieses Gespräch führen. Wir machen jetzt mal so eine halbe Stunde lockeres Palaver. Und wenn wir da durch sind, dann werde ich euch die Chance geben, 1, 2 Fragen zu stellen. Und je nachdem, wie ich drauf bin, lasse ich sie sogar beantworten. Im Wesentlichen wird es um Superman gehen, weil wegen und Geburtstag, aber natürlich soll es auch um die Person des Künstlers hier gehen. Ich finde es so komisch irgendwie. Are we sitting deeper than the others? It's like watching it. Okay, normalerweise kann man so das alles so ein bisschen überblicken. Ich sehe jetzt hier tatsächlich nur die vordere Reihe, weiß nicht, ob da hinten sind. Oh Gott, halt's Maul, mach weiter. Ja, aber was ich noch sagen wollte, wir halten das in Englisch. Ich könnte versuchen, es zu paraphrasieren, was wir so palavern, allerdings nur, wenn hier eine Majorität von Englischunkundigen wäre. Deswegen eine kurze Vermeldung, wer ist des Englischen alles halbwegs mächtig? Okay, dann reicht es in Englisch. Falls jemand es nicht versteht, darf er hinterher zu mir kommen, dann kriegt er die Kurzfassung. Alright, this was the introduction. And I explained that we will do it in English, so we will do it. It just sounds strange. And it's merely it's all about Superman, but it's also about you.
Okay.
We ran a little late because you have been stopped by Greg Hildebrand. What did you get some professional advice by him?
Yeah. It's very important. Every artist has a hole in their game. We know where they are, and most of us can see it in each other's work. And that was my attempt to learn more about color from the great Greg Hildebrand. I know an idea of color. I can work in color, but to find out how he applies his color was important to me. And got his phone number. I'm gonna go. Jeannie, his wife, is gonna have a nice little barbecue. We're gonna sit and hang out in the studio. I'm gonna bring some beer. We're gonna have a good time.
Well, I think we have to stop this now because I have to go with you outside to kill you. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I envy that, really. So, yeah, we talked about this when we went upstairs. Are you a fanboy of Greg Hildebrand? Or?
Yeah. His Tolkien stuff, you know, it was just absolutely dynamite. I'm completely floored by the way he applies and thinks in terms of color, the vibrant scale. Someone who doesn't know what they're looking at may consider it somewhat amateurish because it is so bright. But no, it's much deeper than that, and it's crazy good. It really is, and I had to touch. I had to touch him in an appropriate place. You know, Milo Manaro maybe, but I was very excited when I came here and my fiance Jess was telling me who was going to be here. That Robert Crumb, though I have yet to see him, was going to be here, and that Milo Manaro was going to be here, and Lieber Miho and Greg Hildebrand. I would have paid for the trip.
Got strange things in my ear. Well, but I think that's really nice because it's really good to hear that someone who is for... I think there are a lot of people around here who would just want to touch you, and it's nice to hear that you're still a fanboy for something in the comic scene. So that's.
We all are. Yeah, look, there are. To me, there's no pecking orders. It's just one big continuous circle. And I started out. Some of you may be aspiring artists, and if you are, I started out where you were, looking up, asking questions, trying to figure it out, and through hard work and some good luck along the way, I was able to come along to this point now where people are viewing me in a very verified way that it's kind of humbling to me. You know, I did a sketchbook for the show's proprietor, and I'm looking through it and I'm aghast at the talent that is right next to my sketch. When I looked at the 75 years of Superman, crazy. I never would have thought, you know, I would be on the same wall as Joe Shuster, Kurt Swan, John Byrne, all these just fantastic artists. So sometimes it's, because you never see yourself the way others do, you know? And it was eye-opening for me. And I can only say I'm blessed.
So let's go one step back, probably 2 or 3 steps more. Part of every of these podiums is to ask the artist, how was the way into the business? Did you teach have you teach it by yourself? Did you learn it by yourself how to draw?
Self-taught. Yeah, well, every artist is to a degree, you know, and then you hit a plateau. The first talent in doing any kind of artistic venture, it doesn't have to be comic art or painting. It could be music. It could be acting. It could be poetry. It's a genuine passion for what you do, because passion is something that cannot be replaced. Passion is something you're born with. It cannot be contrived. It cannot be developed. Either you want it or you don't. And that's what, when people ask me, does my child have talent? That's what I ask them. I never even look at the work, because your entire life is about learning skill sets and honing them and becoming better and better and better, and applying your natural instinct, which you've picked up through your passion, and applying it to your work. And that in and of itself becomes your talent. And then whether it's marketable or not, that's a whole other thing. But without question, it starts off with passion. And as a kid, I did a lot of what many kids would do. I would go to my school library or to my local library and pick up as many art books as I possibly could. My parents were very, very supportive, always buying me supplies, encouraging me. My teachers, very much supportive, encouraging me. So I knew at that time that if nothing else, I could do this. Whether I would or not was a question of finding out where my niche was. Now, as a comic book fan, that's a ready-made audience. And it's easy to find an audience in comic books. Much harder to do it as a fine artist just going from gallery to gallery. It's all about word of mouth and to the same 10 people for the longest time seeing the same walls. But in this one, you have characters that are beloved and talent that is beloved through the characters. And if you're lucky, you can find your following. But yeah, every artist is self-taught, but only to a degree. And then from there, it's a matter of asking the right questions and looking for the right opportunities. When I went to high school, I went to vocational school for commercial art. And from there, I went to the Joe Kubert School and took 2 years of that and immediately started looking for work.
So, was it easy for you to come into business, or was it like a very stony way?
A little of both. The easy part was being a Kubert student. A Joe Kubert student, at the time, the only school of its kind in the world. And I remember having everybody from all over the world, Canadians and Europeans and everybody who was interested. It was either this or the John Bishima School. But that one was, I believe, was just short-lived. But the Joe Cuba School has cranked out so much good talent, and it's got such a high degree of pedigree that it's easy to say, I'm a Cubie. And people instantly say, okay, let me see your portfolio. Whereas someone who isn't affiliated with a school that is specifically designed for this kind of work, you may have a harder time. But then again, you know, it's the same thing no matter what you do. You can have pedigree, you still got to be able to dance. And I brought my portfolio pieces with me. What I did, I'll give you a little background. Okay, a little further back. When I got out of art school, my first job was was delivering newspapers, because our jobs are not that easily attainable. It gave me two things. It gave me a set of hours early in the morning to just go ahead and make a few bucks to pay for my car insurance. At the same time, it gave me daily want ads and the rest of the day to work on my portfolio. And because I was able to get access to daily want ads and I was able to work on my portfolio, I found a job for a silk screener, making t-shirts. I mean, we might do something like this. And I was in the art department. Now, unfortunately, my boss was not exactly the most ethical boss in the world. He freely broke copyright law. And I remember during Christmas, they'd give me a Christmas catalog and say, do that. And I would do it, but change it just enough so that there was no copyright infringement, really, because who knows who's going to be to blame. You know, my boss would take the brunt, but who knows what would happen if they came down on me. So I knew enough to change it along the way, but certain things we couldn't change. And he would take big names like Benetton, Esprit, Nike, Disney, New York Mets, New York Yankees, Banana Republic, anything that would sell. He would have film of their logo, but without the copyrights. So we would make joggers, you know, the shirts and the pants to go with it. And well, one day I'm working in my in my studio, in the studio of the shop, and I'm at the end of a hallway, and one of the doors next to me is my boss. His name is Mel, and Mel was yelling. Now Mel always yells, but this time he's screaming, and I'm wondering what the hell's going on here. So I crack open the door, and there's a crowd of people standing in front of his closed door, and he's yelling apparently to his lawyer. And in that crowd was Channel 2 news cameras. So I closed the door. I checked my clock and opened up the door, snuck past the crowd, made a left, past the camera, into the back in the production area where they actually did the t-shirts. And I talked to my buddy, Sean, and I says, Sean, what's happening? And he said, well, you remember so-and-so that Mel fired? I go, yeah. Well, he blew the whistle on Mel. So, okay, well, this may be my last day of work. So I get back and I head back to my studio. And as I'm going toward it, I'm seeing undercover police, Linden police, FBI, James Bond, CIA, just ripping through papers. And I get a tap on my shoulder. And I turn around, and it was Elliot Ness. And he says, he looks to me and he says, do you know where the art films are? And I said, yes, I do. And he says, you're going to show them to me? I said, yes, I will. And I went into my roommate, who was my art director. She was having her teeth done that day. Luckily, I was the one. So I go back in there, I start pulling out films, and as I'm pulling them out, there's this bright light that zaps me on the left. And I turn, and there's Channel 2 camera right on top of me. So, I'm pulling out nervous laughter, And that shook me to the point, and you know, after the end of the day, we all got together and sat around, and we discussed not coming back. That it was too heavy, and at the time I might have been 22, 23 years old, too young to deal with that kind of nonsense. And of course, he was going to trudge on, you know, and he was going to take whoever was going to go with him to continue, and I was out, and I was done. And then I was unemployed, and this was in Christmas of 1988. So what I did was, again, go to the want ads, and the only thing available was making sandwiches at a Subway sandwich shop. And I got pretty good at it. But again, it wasn't making enough money. I couldn't afford my place. And this is where family comes in, because, you know, God bless mom and dad and my sister and my uncle. I got to the point where I couldn't make my rent and there was no food in the house. And so my father and my uncle sprung for 1 month's rent, and my sister and my mother got care packages of groceries for me. And that held me on. And I worked furiously at my portfolio, and then I called Mike Chen from the Joe Kubert School, who's in administration. And I said, Mike, please give me some phone numbers of some editors at DC Comics. And he did. And I started making my calls. And as soon as I got my first editor to agree, I called 4 other ones. And I said, I'm going to be here at this day. Could you please make yourself available? Excuse me. And that's how I was able to get my first set of interviews. My first interview was Mike Carlin, and he didn't like me, artistically. He said I was a year away. And Andy Helfer was another one, and he completely forgot about it. And when I walked in to have my interview with him, he looked at me like I was going to shoot him. A deer in the headlights, like, what? I did what? Huh? Yeah. We'll talk another time. Barbara Kahlberg was another editor, and she was on the way out the door. These people forget that they make appointments with you. But she was going to come back in 2 weeks because she was going off to Wisconsin to Gen Con to deal with people of TSR, you know, Dungeons and Dragons people. And I forget who one was out, and I forgot who the other editor was. But what I did is that I had my A portfolio and my B portfolio. My A portfolio was what I felt was my best pieces, and my B portfolio was my second best pieces. And as one kept getting repeatedly dismissed as a piece, I would say, okay, this one does not work. I will pull it out and pull out my strongest one from my B portfolio and slip it back in. And this went on for the day, and the only thing I had to hang on to, Karen Berger was the other one, and she had nothing for me. Vertigo, she was doing. And so I came back home. I said, okay, well, I have a shot in 2 weeks with another editor. Let me see if I can work on some of these things, and hopefully, when Barbara comes back, I'll give it a couple of weeks. I'll make some more calls, ask some other editors if they're available. And I did that, and I remember the last meal before that 2 weeks was up, and I was about to go back to talk to Barbara and who else I forgot. I remember my last meal, because I had gotten to the point where, okay, this is it. I have like a week left, and I'm down to 1 can of tomato sauce and spaghetti, and that was it. Not even a meat sauce, just regular old spaghetti sauce. And I'm not the most religious person in the world. This is what I got. You know, this is it. You know, if I know, I'll know tomorrow whether or not I'm in this industry. And I walked in, and the first one was Barbara Kahlberg, and she liked my portfolio. She said she had a project. If I was interested, she would like to give me some character sheets for me to do and see if I could do that. And I did that, and I brought them back, and she liked it. She talked to TSR, and they hired me to do Forgotten Realms. And I don't know if it was wisdom or cocksuredness, but one of the first things I got was a contract. I wanted to make sure I had work. I was not going to go back to spaghetti with no meat sauce. I was going to have my meat sauce. And that was, that's, you know, the ABCs of how I got in. And, you know, it's perseverance. Any editor will tell you that if you want to get in this industry, you have to constantly bug them. They'll tell you if you're a pain in the, you know, and you just keep going, because every editor has a talent pool of people they like to work with, people who they know what to expect. They know what to expect from the writers. They know how long it takes this artist to work. They know how long it takes this inker to work. They know how long it takes for the colorist to get the work in. So they have an idea of what it takes to get a book out. And in order for you to break into that talent pool, there has to be a project available that there's no one there in their talent pool left. So perseverance is very important. You have to get in there and constantly bug them, because eventually someone's not going to be there for the one project they have to get off. And that's where they'll most likely find your break.
So this was really detailed, but I didn't break you in this story because I thought it's fascinating, and I know there are a lot of very similar stories by other artists.
Yeah.
They would tell the very same thing up to the point where they only had tomato sauce. And the thing is, I think everybody who really wants to go into the business, he needs three things: talent a little bit, but also he needs the strength to go through it, and a little bit of luck.
Yeah, yeah. And no crazy landlords.
Oh yeah, no crazy landlords.
I had a landlord try to shoot me once.
Oh my God.
He was drinking. He Agostino Mendonca, I remember. He drank. He had. I had no idea what was in the basement, but apparently it's liquor. And he used to drink. And one time, I was working, and I was up 3 o'clock in the morning. I had my headphones on because I had neighbors upstairs, and got the music on, and I'm lost in my little world, and he's downstairs. So he comes up saying, "Hey, neighbors are complaining about your noise." I said, "What noise?" I got my headphones on. I'm very quiet. I'm like, "I'm house." And he says, No, who's complaining?" I said, "Neighbors are complaining." I said, "Who's complaining?" "They are." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, all right, I guess, look, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just trying to get some work done. You know, it's late. What are you even here for?" He was drunk, and you could smell it, and you could tell. I pieced it together later. And then he pulled out a gun, and he threatened to shoot me because he wanted to break my lease. Not because I was a terrible tenant, not because I was late, because he just got married and he wanted the place back. He wanted to break the lease any way possible. He figured he'd scare me out of it. And it's not bravery to do stupid things like, "Oh yeah?" As I looked him dead in the eye, I says, "I'm not going anywhere till my lease is up. You can wait until then." And I closed the door. And that was it. And he, before I closed it, one moment of heroic, came up to me and he goes, "Okay, what else?" And he put the gun away. And that's right. And then I shook back to my table.
So I'm very glad you didn't get shot, and I'm very glad you made it into the business. So I tried to bring this now to Superman. So you're in business and you worked on several projects, but I think Superman might be one of the most important, or probably the important one. So what means Superman for you?
What does it mean to me?
Yeah.
It means that when I was 5 years old and I had the Treasury edition of Superman, and it was a story about Mxyzptlk hitting him over the head because he had a terrible headache. And in the back it was, "Kids, draw Superman." What Superman means to me is that I had all the neighborhood kids in my school. At this time I was already considered a very artistic child. And I was already first in my art classes, and all the teachers loved it, and I would do special projects, and I would do scenery for school plays and things like that. But what it meant to me is that Superman gave me my first job when I was 8, 9 years old. Because I charged people 5 cents for me to teach them how to draw Superman. Because I had the material. The source material was right there. I had it right there in the back of the book, and I tried to show them, you got to draw the circle, you got to do the line, this is the guideline, this is the eyes, the nose, the mouth. And they were like, that's not how you draw. But this is what they told me. And of course I didn't know what I was doing, but I was learning. And I thought I had enough to teach them, at least enough to try to get over on them. That's what Superman means to me. Superman, because and this is important, because when I got together with Grant, I hated Superman prior to it. I didn't like Superman because I didn't like the direction he was in. I hated that he was married. I hated that he was considered too old and nobody cared about him. I hated the fact that every time you saw him, all the other heroes would do one of two things. Either fawn over Superman as if they'd never seen him before, or they would be browbeaten by Superman who was acting like their dad. These things did not appeal to me. The Superman I liked was the Max Fleischer cartoons, where he was less powerful. I thought he was too omnipotent. I thought it was too easy to write a script where he would spin the globe backwards to make time go back, or that he would push against the mountain to put the Earth back into orbit. He got to be to the point of ridiculousness to me. And then he was married, which was equally ridiculous. Because if you know anything about storytelling, when the prince and the princess get together at the end of the story, it's the end of the story. It's happily ever after. The hero no longer has teeth because his priorities have shifted to family, to his wife. He no longer is going to risk himself. So that's why I thought the marriage was terrible. So all these things were terrible to me with Superman. And when I talked to Grant, I was relieved that everything was going right back to basics, and we're going to start all over again. And we're going to get that jive of when he was trying to figure things out, and trains were going to hurt if he ran into them, and lightning was going to hurt if he got shot. And you know, he may be unsure of whether this bullet is going to be the one to kill him. These are things that were more interesting to me. Liking the fact that he was leaping from place to place and not flying. I just thought it was kind of weird that he just kind of like learns to float. I don't get that. You know, I like him leaping better. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I'm going to go on anyway.
Well, we're now closer to the theme of things, so I'll just let you tell.
I'll just go right into it then. But but these are the things that mattered to me, because, you know, when you would see a Max Fleischer cartoon, the Superman would slam up against the building, the facade of the building, and he would lift his feet up on top of the ledge, and he would push himself off the building, and you could feel that push. And then, knowing how well and how difficult it is just to do what he just did, then you know that when he got hit by a train, he's trying to stop a train, it's excruciatingly painful. That's how a hero is made. He isn't made by yawning when an anvil falls on his head, like they did in the 50s. You know, that's silly to me. You know, I want a little more tangibility with my characters. I want to be able to know that what they're doing is difficult, and it's supposed to be difficult. It's the hard work that they're doing. That's what we're supposed to be appreciating. It's not appreciating how cute they look in tights, you know, or whether they're showing enough cleavage, or if you know, he's just so cool that nothing can hurt him. That becomes boring. You know, give me some substance, make it real, make it feel like what he's doing matters. Because when you feel, that's how it hits you.
So did the editors on Superman approve this idea from the beginning? Like not having Superman super anymore?
I'll give you a little secret. Editors are handcuffed often by continuity. And a lot of what we do is redundant only because you can only go so far because of what's happened before. So anytime you get a chance to have a fresh start, and wipe the slate clean, it's always invigorating for everybody, including the editors, because they have a fresh approach now. Now, granted, what we were doing was hearkening to what had been done before. Lois Lane was still there. He was still a reporter of some sort. It was still Jimmy Olsen. But we revisited some things that were forgotten. We revisited Mr. Taylor and the Daily Star. We revisited Miss Nixley and her son. And we revisited the Legion of Superheroes when they first came into Superman's life. And we took it and put a little twist to it, a little different to it. We changed the copyright just enough so we wouldn't get in trouble. And we went ahead and made it familiar and new at the same time, and we were lucky that people were very receptive to it, and we were very thankful for that, because it was kind of risky, you know? Because fans loved the continuity, and the first reaction to 52, people were freaking out. People were very upset, because it meant that everything that they've been doing all these years meant nothing now. And it wasn't our intent to destroy any of that. It was our intent to just reset for a second. And if number counting was what was important to you, well, I don't know what to say about that. We thought it was more about the stories, and that's what we were trying to do.
Let me take another thought in this rearranging Superman. I liked very much when I was a child, and I went like a nerd child. And this time, it was the time of this very special relationship between Superman and Batman. It was like they have been like kindergarten friends, and sometimes Superman would just stop by at Batman's lair, and they were talk, and it was always a little bit like well. The class Primus is talking to the bad guy of the class, but they're still in the same class and talking to. And then this special friendship vanished when Frank Miller did his great novel, because it was still the same, but it was like, but it has to come to this in the end.
Yeah.
And after that, it was like gone. You know, Batman and Superman have been more separated, and so I want this friendship coming back.
Well, we did touch upon it in action. You know, Batman does help Superman figure something out. You see it a little bit in the Justice League. Again, let's not forget that it's a reset. So, despite the fact that you have this warm spot in your heart for a story that was designed in the 1950s to satisfy the comics code, there is a certain amount of juice between these two, and I assure you, they will be heroic friends in time. It's just bound to happen. They've already set the groundwork for it. It's just a matter of waiting for it to happen.
Very good. 75 years of a super icon.
Yeah.
What makes a character that took a while until he came into the comic books? I know they were turned down a couple of times before they finally ended up in Action Comics #1,
Mm-hmm.
and more or less by accident, because they had to fill up the pages, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went huge, and it's now Superman is probably the best-known comic figure in the whole world.
Yeah.
So, what is, after 75 years, the fascination of Superman, in your opinion?
I think most of us go through a pretty complex life. We wake up with certain problems and ideals and things that we want to do. We have to concern ourselves with those of us with children, with their education. We want to concern ourselves with our job and our promotions and our standing in the society. we complicate things. But when we look at Superman, it's Smallville, it's tractors, it's mom and pa, it's that warm feeling that you get of a nostalgic past where things were always brighter. I think it's kind of an escape into a more idealized way. However tragic this character is, let's not forget he's an adopted child from another planet. And that he was always considered, well, more so now, less so then, but more so now because now this whole idea of the meta-human being scary, a la the X-Men, that is now feeding into the narrative of Superman being a bit more alienated and strange, stranger than fiction. But still, it's honestly, it's about a boy and his dog, and I think that's a very nice thing that people really can, every one of us can really associate. We all had that pet, the pet turtle, the pet rock, that whatever it was that you had that was your little buddy, your stuffed animal you carried with you. Superman has that in Crypto. He has that in Supergirl, his cousin. He has that in Ma and Pa. And I forget who it was who said this, but Superman is the only character in comics that didn't become his character in comics. He simply was his character in comics. Bruce Wayne has to wear a cowl to be Batman. The Flash has to wear his suit. I digress. Wonder Woman may be the only other one who was born to be the character that they are. Whereas Superman has to be Clark Kent to be a disguise. So it's almost as if he has no choice to do what he does. And he is so wholesome and such a Boy Scout and such a good guy and always doing the right thing at the right time. And the fact that he's challenged by these things that we all have to put up with. People prodding us and poking us. When we would rather just reach out and slap them, Superman has to think to the betterment of that. And in his shoes, in being in that position, we have to root for him because I think we all want to be good. And we all want to be the high ideal. And I think in the end, we don't want evil to reign supreme. You know, we want to have the angel on his shoulders. You know, we don't want the devil on that one. So I think that's really what it boils down to, is that he really does speak to everybody's just desire to do the best that we can do. And that he does it for us. And that gives us that little bit of like, you know what? We can do it too. I just got to buck up a little bit.
You know, I was talking about superheroes in general and Superman in special with a couple of people from the scene, but also with some people teaching fine art and stuff, and they told me, you know, the superheroes probably replace angels in our thinking. They're like higher, well, entities or whatever, that give us the feeling that the good is still in the world. Mm-hmm. And especially, I know some of the artists, they look at the fine art in churches from former times when they have painted those big angels standing over the people and like watchers or whatever, and then they transfer this into the comic books. Like there's a Alex Ross did in this when Superman was standing in the air about this field and his cape like the wings of an angel and looking down. It's like an archangel picture from the past. So I know many of the artists inspired by that, and they like to transfer this. Mm-hmm. So what do you like to draw with Superman? What's your preferred pose or your preferred scenes to do?
Well, for sure, you know, you want a certain amount of heroism, but let's not forget that dealing with Superman at a time when he was becoming heroic. So there was a lot less of having been the iconic thing, like when Alex Ross did it. Because when Alex Ross did it, he was already Superman of the thousands generations of Superman. So he was already the pristine, complete figure. The one I was dealing with was the clay, and we were molding him, and we were giving him trials and the tribulations. In fact, instead of him being an angel, if you want to talk about angel archetypes of idealism in fine art, it's more of the trials of Heracles. Rather than him being an angel, it's more about him becoming a god rather than him just simply being one. So I can't really say that we've completely gotten there when I handled it. That's for other artists to do. And to be honest with you, I think it really spoke to my strength, because to me, I think my best thing that I can ever incorporate is naturalism. I love naturalism, and I love to make my heroes natural. The scene where Superman is trying to sleep and he gets barraged by Detective Blake and Miss Nixley, and he's standing there in a sweater. That was one of my favorite scenes, because I get to play up a lot of things that he was trying to do with himself in his disguise of Clark Kent. And it's a lot of body language, a lot of drama, and those are the kinds of things that I like. And I think that might have been primarily why I was hired. Really, was to try to give this particular version of Superman some substance from which to draw, so that you can continue the development in future issues. So, but I don't know. I don't think I'm even good at that heroic thing, stock poses and stuff like that. That kind of thing. When I was a kid, I didn't imitate a guy doing a great punch-out scene. I would try to look at the two guys talking in a theater and say, I can do it better. And that's what I would do. Because I had an natural inclination for body language and posing and a naturalness. That's what fascinated me. So, yeah, as much as I would love to sit there and say, I'm geeky too, you know, I'm probably more of a storyteller than a pinup artist, I think.
Well, actually, what I can say is that you're doing a good job on it, because since Superman of the New 52, I restarted reading it. I haven't done that for a long time. Also, I started out with Superman when I was a little kid, and I loved the figure. But then, when I completely lost interest in it, and now the interest is back. So
I know when that happened.
Yeah.
I know when that happened.
When?
Keith Giffen says, we lose our audience when they lose their virginity. Because the power fantasy isn't important anymore. And here I've got a couple young kids.
I think about that.
I think I'm blushing.
But, to bring up one last thing. You did a good job on Superman, as I said. For me, you did. So, but for the birthday of Superman, they present us a new movie. Do you think they did a good job on this too?
I haven't seen it yet.
Have you?
I'm going to the premiere the day before of its opening night with the group from DC Comics. So I'll be in New York City on the 13th, early that morning, to watch it. What I've seen from the trailers, I'm very excited about it. I think, they tell you right there in the trailers that they're talking about his alienation, how he's not like everybody else, and you know, Zod comes down and he says, he looks like one of you, but he is not one of you. And the effects are just, it's as we say in America, it's stupid. You know, it's just that good. You know, it just leaves you completely catatonic. I think it's gonna make people think back at Avengers and laugh. You know, and I have a gripe about that, by the way. I saw those memes on Facebook. I saw how they were all crowing about they sold this billions and that billions and Batman, you're next. Let me tell you something. It took 5 of you to do what one Batman did. And it took a shooting in Colorado to end it. Remember that. Marvel.
Well, actually, I have highest hopes to this movie.
It's gonna rock.
I have seen a couple of trailers by now. I do not know much about the story, but I don't want to spoil on one hand. On the other hand, I think Superman has been a little bit at the movies has been a little bit ruined by the last movie. So I hope we can gain interest by telling at least that what I know, that a major part of the movie will play on Krypton, because it's
You know.
a lot of the heritage of Superman. It's not only Superman and another origin or something like that. It is a story that is really deep into why Superman became Superman here on Earth, and this is founded on Krypton, and it is founded on a story that started with his father and General Zod.
Yeah.
So I think the pictures with that will be great, and I think the story, will be really, really good, and hopefully bring us into a circle of 3 good Superman movies.
I hope so too. You know, I mean, and I remember, I forgot who it was, again on Facebook. One of my contemporaries was complaining about how he was tired of seeing the same story. And I said, listen, don't forget, it's not the same story when you've got a different director. It's always going to be a different story, because every aspect of a story has many prongs to it, and you decide which one's going to be the highlight of what it is that you're talking about. Back in the Donner Superman, you had the sense of wonderment, and he was trying to get you to really, he was trying to sell you that you could believe a man could fly, and the technology at the time was pretty darn good. So he was really trying to sell you the wonderment, I guess, so that you can see him floating above the cop, and you would say, wow, he really is flying, that's pretty cool. And then when the Superman Returns, this is part of what DC has done, and I don't know if it's something that they do with any kind of proper motivation, but the stigma with DC Comics has always been Batman with Adam West, and it's always been viewed as superheroes is just Batman with Adam West. A bunch of dopey little jokes wrapped around some bam and pow and biff. And because DC was first in line to put up with the McCarthyism of the 50s and was first in line to have to change itself and adhere to the Comics Code Authority, the idea of comic books had gotten very immature very quickly, and it was always viewed as children's material. So when they tried to do the new Batman with Michael Keaton, they were really trying to do some pretty scary stuff. And Jack Nicholson was brilliant in that. Heath Ledger was stupid brilliant with that. But everything DC has done is try to kill the idea of Adam West. And it's really kind of cool now, because now we kind of love Adam West, not just for that, because he's really great on Family Guy. He's the great man. He is awesome. So they really write some beautiful things for him. So he's become a bit of a, much like Shatner, he's become a caricature of himself. So I think we can safely put that away and say, okay, we have enough Batman movies, and we now even have a Superman movie where he was an absentee father. Personally, I liked this story because it wasn't what was done before, and I liked it because it was a risk, and I liked it because here's a situation where Superman is brought into, again, an average, everyday situation that many parents may find themselves in, where there's an absentee father, and all of a sudden comes back. And it's easy to dismiss that he didn't have an idea that she was pregnant, you know, but then she got pregnant. So there's a responsibility to that. And I liked that, you know, because it was a very difficult situation. I think maybe in this particular case, though, something like family is even something that even Superman can't be superheroic about. In the end, he does the right thing. But the idea of the story, and I do kind of agree on that, the idea of the story of him being gone and then coming back to this was something that may have been approached with another character, not with Superman. However, I do think the story was well done. I thought it was, what the hell was he? Who's the one who was doing, tip of my tongue, Luther.
Yeah.
Kevin Spacey, thank you. Wow, great Luther. Really good Luther. And made Luther scary, really, you know? Before he was just like this really smart guy, you know, and had bumbling guys and, you know, just, but I love the fact that he had a snap temper, you know? He would just like, he would try to keep his cool because he's so superior, but then he realizes he's the smartest kid in the class. And, damn it, I can't take it anymore, you know? You're an idiot, and you too. So I liked that version of Superman. I thought, again, the premise was a little bit of a risk, but I thought it was pretty well done, and I thought everybody played their roles really well. Although I didn't really like the particular direction of what's his first name, Ralph, the guy who played Superman when he was doing Clark Kent. He did a really good version of Christopher Reeve doing Clark Kent. That was kind of like, I've seen that already, give me a different kind of version of Clark Kent, you know. I kind of thought that was kind of dopey, you know, for lack of a better term. I thought he could have done a better direction with that. But other than that, you know, I'm one of the few people that actually thought it was okay.
Well, for me, just my opinion, it was like, it would have probably have been a good movie when it had been started in the in the row of the 70s, 80s movies, because I thought it was too retro styled from the story. But anyhow,
dealing with another director.
Yeah,
the director is their own artist, and they all want to have their own say. So that becomes a personal thing at that point.
That's the point.
Yeah.
So in the end, we are at the end of this telling. So now we can do a little bit of Q&A. So where are the questions? Probably we have answers. Please.
Just a question about the New 52. So DC is doing this whole reset thing, and it's a bold marketing move, but it's also very risky, and it can cost them a lot because fans can be very unforgiving.
Yeah.
So, how big really was the pressure on you? The pressure from yourself, and also from the studio execs and so on that wanted this to work, because it was one of the 2 flagship titles of DC. It is still so.
It's a good question. When I first was approached with this project, I thought I was going to be doing something else. Jeff Johns and I, for the longest time, been talking about doing Captain Marvel, and I love Shazam. Captain Marvel, that's one of my favorite characters to draw. And I never thought I did a good enough job in any JSA stuff I did with him in it. And I really wanted to stick my head into the big red cheese. What? Didn't sound good. I wanted to wrap my mind around the concept of the big red cheese. Anyway, so out of the clear blue, after waiting and waiting, and after doing Canterbury cricket, nobody? Okay. I see. I was, after first wave, there was nothing for me. Contractually, they have to give me work because I'm exclusive. But at the time, after first wave, nothing was happening. So I'm scrounging and scraping and saying, "Hey, somebody give me work, give me work, give me work." And I kept pestering them. Now at the time, they were in the drawing room with 52, and I had no concept because they don't tell anybody anything. God forbid there's any leaks. But so they weren't saying anything to anybody, and I certainly didn't have an idea. And so they would throw a cover, and then they would throw me this cover, and I did the Captain Marvel with the scratch across his eyes and the teenagers, and that's the first time I had a clue that they were going to try to do something different with characters, but again, not knowing the scope or exactly what was in plan. So I'm waiting and waiting, and finally, after Canterbury cricket, I finally made enough money, so I said, okay, I'm going to go to New Hampshire for a week and visit my kids from my first marriage, which is one of the reasons why I was late on a project. Plus, I had extra 9 pages, and when everybody else had 20 or 25 pages, so I had extra pages to do. And whenever you do a first project, it's always a lot of work. But I'm going to tell you right now, I was never intimidated. The only reason why you're never intimidated simply is because we have a professional approach to it. We don't look at it from a fan's point of view when we go into a project. So here I am waiting for work, and out of the clear blue, Matt Allison says, "Hey, we want to give you Action Comics." And I'm like, I want to do Captain Marvel. Shazam, man. And he says, "And we're going to give you Action Comics from issue number 1. I'm like, okay. "And you're going to be working with Grant Morrison." Oh, okay. And then it dawned on me after I hung up the phone that I just agreed to do Captain or Superman in Action Comics from issue number 1 with Grant Morrison. That was probably the only time I was ever giddy like a schoolboy in my career. Really excited to work with a great writer. And then, oh boy, Action Comics, number 1. And then I went on Facebook, and I don't know any of you are on my Facebook wall, but you may remember when I went, oh boy, 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 and then I pasted it and copied it, and it went like this long on my page. That's what it was about. That's when it finally dawned on me that I had this great opportunity. So I was very excited. Pressure, no, because when you get a script, Superman is easy to draw because there's a template for him. You're not up against that. What you're up against as you draw him is the history of Superman. You're up against Wayne Boring. You're up against Neil Adams. You're up against Kurt Swan, Schuster, John Byrne, all these big, heavy-hitting artists that have done it before. So your version has to follow the template, but be just as good as theirs. That was a challenge. Wasn't any pressure. And so, because when you get a script, you put your professional hat on and you start thinking in terms of nuts and bolts. And this needs to be done. Okay, this establishing shot here. I got to do this with the Daily Planet. Okay, he's going to be a blogger. Okay, he's going to look like this. All right, I probably have that outfit someplace in the house. Okay, that kind of a thing. But never, no, I can't say there was any real pressure for me. Maybe more pressure for the publisher because it was a risk. And because people still haven't forgiven them for it. And it's funny because I'm drawing all these sketches down for people, and every time they want Batman, it's never the new 52 Batman. Superman, And sometimes I'll gauge it based on who's asking for it. Like, for instance, I had this young lady who asked me for a Superman, and she had to be all of 11, maybe. So I gave her Teen Beat Superman. You know, very, hey, you know, I'm in a boy band. Which I thought she might have appreciated. You know, if someone who's older, I may give them classic Superman or something like that. But yeah, I think even the professionals, yeah, I can say for sure the professionals probably don't forgive them either, because all those lines and all those costumes, you know, which is ironic that even Batman has a Kryptonian outfit.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I don't know if it's so much change for change's sake, but I also do, but again, like I said, the continuity is a good thing. It's also a very handcuffing thing. And you don't want to have to sit there and be the same safe story over and over again. So let's wipe some of that off. Let's shake some of that off. Let's give us a little more freedom and try to do like-minded stories, but a little bit more interesting, a little bit more in tune with the times, a little bit more in tune with the sensibility of the world as it is now. So I think maybe that's what it was.
Okay, another question? Yeah.
You mentioned the Legion of Superheroes, and I always wondered about that. I mean, it's a great idea having that superhero team 1,000 years in the futures, having adventures with Superman. And I have read some good stories, but you also mentioned, like, for example, that from the Dana movie, where he simply reverses back the Earth, and many people don't like it. And isn't that like the same problem with the Legion of Superheroes? I mean, even if they're careful, I mean, every time Superman is in contact, is in the future or is in contact with them, there's a risk that of a spoiler. I mean, he already knows that in 1,000 years there are going to be superheroes because of them.
Yeah.
And of course he could also, if he's in contact with them, always ask them, you know, just tell me what's going to happen next and I can prepare for that.
Yeah, well, that's true, but then again, then you start running into these things of the theory of if you crushed a butterfly in the past, what's going to do to the future kind of thing, you know, so maybe you don't want to get too much information because that would change the way things go, and then before you know it, they're floating off in some other planet and they don't know how they got there, you know, because of some information. There's a lot of plausible deniability in comic books, and it's a lot of it, you know, is I think in order to, in my estimation, if you want to make a fantasy plausible, have it based in a certain amount of common sense. And that's a situation where time has been one of these things that's been monkeyed with over and over and over again, to the point we've accepted certain laws that you don't talk about the future to someone from the past. So I think in this particular case, you've got a Superman who, okay, understands that he is the prototype for what the future is. And because of the type of character he is and the type of person he is, he's learning now to be more cautious with what he does next. Because now he's cultivating something, you see. So, yeah, and then there's always the problem of running into so many different written versions of it, because every writer has their own take on it, and I think they all basically have that same basic rule. You know, let's just do it cautiously because you have a very good point, you know, and it's those points that can make either for fascinating stories or really ridiculous ones. But I think that's really the best thing I could tell you. You know, it's such a over there kind of a thing that I really couldn't mention anything about it unless I was writing it, and personally I would probably steer clear of those kinds of stories. I really would. There's too many headaches.
So, okay, I think we can do one last question. I want a girl, so
I'm the last.
we have two girls there with questions. So, we can do two questions. So, first you.
Okay, what did you think about the portrayal of Superman in the Young Justice series? I bet you've seen it.
I have not seen that, no.
Huh?
No, no. You would be surprised how little I actually do get to see.
Okay, then on to the next one.
I'm sure it was great. I loved it. I loved it. There's a camera.
Well, then maybe my question is also very similar. What did you think of the Smallville series?
I never saw it. You know, it was one of those things. Yeah. I gotta be honest with you, I'm 46. And I'm a 46-year-old man. And cute Superman with his shirt running around, with his shirt off all the time doesn't appeal to me. You know? But I've heard nothing but nice things about it, so again, it's great.
Actually, I liked it very much. I'm 44. I liked it very much, but probably there's another thing we have to mention at this point. Being in comic business as an artist or writer means you're working more or less when you have work the whole day. And I can tell it from my job as an editor. I have to do with words all the day. So in the evening, there's one thing I do not like to do anymore. That's reading or writing. I really like to sit in front of the TV and just get this. Because and therefore I do not read too much books or comic books. It's my passion, but I just can't do it. And I think for artists, it's not like they would sit down in the evening and draw, but to have superheroes all the day does not mean you have in your spare time, and this is the feeling you need to have more of superheroes.
When a chef comes home, he doesn't make a meal, he sticks it in the microwave.
That's the point.
It's true, because we are absorbed in it all day long. I work, when I am heavily working, I could work 10, 14 hours a day. And it's every day. I don't have days off unless I decide to take that day off. And which is something I have to do judiciously because I get paid for what I do. I get paid for the page. So if I don't have enough pages, I don't make my bills. So it's the carrot on the end with the donkey, you know. It's, you know, yeah, when I work, I listen to Netflix. You know, I put my headphones on. And I pop in. Oftentimes, I'll pop in something that's related to what I'm doing. For instance, I'm doing a Green Lantern 24 now. I'm doing a single issue. Oh, by the way, thanks for asking. Green Lantern 24 is going to be every page a splash page, kind of like the Death of Superman, where we tell the story of what happened before the Big Bang Theory, before superheroes, before the Green Lantern Corps, before everything that we know ever happened. And they're lightsmiths, and the lightsmiths have harnessed the powers of the colors. And it's going to be an introduction to the lightsmiths and how they get from there to the core. And every one of these pages is going to be a cover for another Green Lantern story that's going to expand on it. So it's a pretty exciting project. It's something I've never really done before because I haven't had a lot of chance to get to do cosmic things. And it's a lot of it is invention by me and the writer Richard Venditti. And so what I like to do when I'm working with that is put on Carl Sagan's The Universe with the headphones and have him really talk about stuff. And it's really cool because, you know, I'm seeing visuals and concepts and listening to this, and it's really helping me with formulate the visual. And I'm either watching that or I'll pop in some stupid movie like, you know, Despicable Me. Or I'll catch up with an old series, like I'll catch up with all the episodes of Arrested Development. Or The Colbert Report, The Daily Show. I'm liberal, by the way. And I'll listen to sports radio. So yeah, without question, there's very little that we're so And when I read a book, it's nonfiction. I don't like fiction because I deal with it all the time. I like to read stories and autobiographies and anecdotes and things like that. So.
What is always fun?
Yes, I wanted to ask. You were so fanboying about other authors giving you advice, and you worked with Grant Morrison. And so, what was it like? What advice did he give you? So.
Shut up and draw what I write. Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison is like working with the wizard from The Wizard of Oz. You don't talk to Grant. You talk to his wife in email only. And they're always a jet-setting couple, so it's often difficult to have your questions answered. That's the downside of it. The upside is that it's always a brilliant story. Difficulty with Grant Morrison is that he writes so much information into it, and artistically you have an instinct for what's going to be superfluous and what's not. But with Grant you can't tell, because everything is used and rehabbed and recycled. And there's always a crowd. Always a crowd scene. And it's always one against the many, you know? So it's a lot of heavy lifting, but it's very gratifying because it's always superbly written, well crafted, and very intelligent. And I mean, one of my things, I remember I cornered him in New York City. We had the DC Comics party every October at the beginning of New York Comic Con. And I remember I cornered him, and I was talking about, what was those angels that we were doing? The Immortals, were they? I think they were called. And he had the Metallics. So I asked him, I says, is this your tongue-in-cheek way of talking about the Roman Empire and Republicans? You know, American Republicans, the right wing? You know, how the Roman Empire was always to keep them busy, building things, but they were always a force for the Senate, you know, who turned out to be the angels. But they would devour their own because they're just that voracious. And he said, well, I never thought about that. And I said, all right, well then I just outthought Grant Morrison. Well, there you go. I came up with something that he didn't even think about. But to me, I'm pretty sure it has something to do with it because he's also very liberal. And he wrote specifically liberal things. Some of the notes he would say, you know, let's do this just to jazz these guys, you know, let's just stick it to these people over here, you know, let's, you know, it's super, but then, you know, he would, everything, the whole Superman taking his shirt off before he said specifically, let's do that for the girls, you know, so that's Grant, you know, and very, he's like a little imp, kind of impish kind of a character where you don't really catch a glimpse of him, you know, he's just kind of there and not, and he's always very gracious and very nice, but as far as learning anything, it was a very difficult one-on-one relationship. It was always through his wife. So he's a very interesting character.
It's difficult for fans too, because to meet him or to
I think
him something to sign or anything, it's very difficult.
I think he's just weirdly shy. You know, either that or he's really pulling off something really cool on everybody, and he's doing it, and he may be like Andy Kaufman, he's treating it like an experiment, you know? You know, he's just trying to see what the reaction he get out of it. You know, the man's a genius, so I let him be Grant, and I just try to do my best to be me, and hopefully if we ever work together, and I told him if we work together, it's definitely going to be off continuity, because I can't deal with this month-to-month grind of crowds and more crowds and crazy robots and angels coming out of everywhere.
Well, you make it alive in the comics, so you're a genius too. And I'm the host here, and I will close this bazaar now. So, thank you very much to this wonderful audience. You have been great. And even more, thank you, Rex Morales. Und verabschieden möchte ich mich noch mit den Worten von Panini. Ihr wisst, diese wunderbaren Dinge kann man bei unserem Stand kaufen. Man kann sie allerdings auch am Kiosk kaufen. Das Wort kaufen bedeutet, kauft es. Aber wenn ihr es hier tut, morgen gibt es nochmal eine Signierstunde mit ihm. Da hat man nochmal die Chance, vielleicht sogar was gezeichnet zu bekommen. Ich weiß, das ist immer sehr schwierig und frustrierend, weil man vom Glück verfolgt sein muss. Aber zumindest Signaturen gehen immer. Das möchte ich an dieser Stelle einfach nochmal gesagt haben, weil viele denken dann immer so, oh, da muss ich mich auch anstellen für eine Signatur. Signaturen können wir immer zwischen reinschieben. Also wer nur was signiert haben möchte, der muss dann auch nicht 2 Stunden warten, bis alle was gezeichnet haben. Das wollte ich an dieser Stelle nur mal sagen. Und ansonsten, besten Dank.